and it's chapter 15. I enter a nightmare from which I wake repeatedly, only to find a great terror awaiting me. All the things I dread the most, all the things I dread for others, manifest in such vivid detail I can't help but believe they're real. Each time I wake, I think, at last, this is over, but it isn't. It's only the beginning of a new chapter of torture. How many ways do I have to watch Prim die, relive my father's last moments? I feel my own body ripped apart. This is the nature of the tracker jacker venom, so carefully created to target the place where fear lives in your brain. When I finally do come to my senses, I lie still, waiting for the next onslaught of imagery, but eventually I accept that the poison must have finally worked its way out of my system, leaving my body racked and feeble. I'm lying on my side, locked in a fetal position. I lift a hand to my eyes to find them sound, untouched by ants that never existed. Simply stretching out my limbs requires an enormous effort. So many parts of me hurt. It doesn't seem worthwhile making an inventory of them. Very, very slowly, I manage to sit up. I'm in a shallow hole, but filled with the humming orange bubbles of my hallucination, but with odd, dead leaves. My clothing's damp. I don't know whether it was from the pond water, dew, rain, or sweat for the cause. For a long time, all I can do is take tiny sips from my bottle and watch a beetle crawl up the side of a honeysuckle bush. How long have I been out? It was morning when I lost reason. Now it's afternoon. But the stiffness in my joints suggests more than a day has passed. Even two, possibly. If so, there's no way of knowing which tribute survived that tracker jacker attack. Not Glimmer or the girl from District 4. But there was the boy from District 1, both tributes from District 2, and PETA. Did they die from the stings? Certainly, if they lived, their last days must have been as horrid as my own. And what about Rue? She is so small, it wouldn't take much venom to do her in. But then again, the tracker jackers wouldn't have had to reach her. She had a good head start. A foul, rotten taste pervades my mouth, and the water has little effect on it. I drag myself over to the honeysuckle bush and pluck a flower. I gently put the stamen through the blossom and set the drop of nectar on my tongue. The sweetness spreads through my mouth, down my throat, warming my veins with memories of summer and my woods home and Gail's presence beside me. For some reason, our discussion from that last morning comes back to me. We could do it, you know. What? Leave the district, run off, live in the woods, you and I. We could make it. And suddenly, I'm not thinking of Gail, but of PETA. And PETA, he saved my life, I think, because by the time we met up, I couldn't tell what was real and what was tracker jacker venom, and it caused me to imagine. But if he did, and my instincts tell me he did, what for? Is it simply working the lover boy angle he initiated at the interview? Or was he actually trying to protect me? And if he was, what was he doing with those careers in the first place? None of it made sense. I wonder what Gail made of the incident for a moment, and then I pushed the whole thing out of my mind. For some reason, Gail and PETA do not coexist well together in my thoughts. So I focus on the one really good thing that's happened since I landed in the arena. I have a bow and arrows. A full dozen arrows if you count the one I retrieved from the tree. They bear no trace of the noxious green slime that came from Glimmer's body, which leads me to believe that it might not have been wholly real, but they have a fair amount of dried blood on them. I can clean them later, but I do take a minute to shoot a few into a nearby tree. They're, they are more like the weapons in the training centre than the ones at my home, but who cares? This I can work with. The weapons give me an entirely new perspective on the games. I know I have tough opponents to face, but I'm no longer merely prey that runs or hides, or takes desperate measures. If Cato broke through the trees right now, I wouldn't flee, I'd shoot. I find I'm actually anticipating the moment with pleasure. But first, I have to get some strength back in my body. I'm very dehydrated again, and my water supply is dangerously low. The little padding I was able to put on by gorging myself during prep time in the capital is gone, plus another kilo or so as well. My hip bones and ribs are more prominent than I remember them, being since those awful months after my father's death. And then there are my wounds to contend with burns, cuts, and bruises from smashing into the trees, and 3 tracker jacker stings, which are as sore and swollen as ever. I treat my burns with the ointment and try dabbing a bit on the stings as well, but it has no effect on them. My mother knew a treatment for them, some type of leaf that could draw out poison, but she seldom had cause to use it, and I don't even remember the name, let alone its appearance. Water first, I think. You can hunt along the way now. It's easy to see the direction I came from by the path of destruction of my crazed body made through the foliage. So I walk off on the other direction, hoping my enemies still lie locked in a surreal world of tracker jacker venom. I can't move too quickly. My joints reject any abrupt motions, but I establish the slow hunter's tread, which I use for tracking game. Within a few minutes, I spot a rabbit and make my first kill with the bow and arrow. It's not my usual clean shot through the eye, but I'll take it. After about an hour, I find a stream, shallow but wide, and more than sufficient for my needs. The sun's hot and severe, so while I wait for water to purify, I strip down to my underclothes and wade into the mild current. I'm filthy from head to toe. I try splashing myself, but eventually just lie down in the water for a few minutes, letting it wash off the soot and blood and skin has started to peel off my burns. After rinsing out my clothes and hanging them on bushes to dry, I sit on the bank in the sun for a bit, untangling my hair with my fingers. My appetite returns, and I eat a cracker and a strip of beef. With a handful of moss, I polish the blood from my silver weapons. Refreshed, I treat my burns again, braid back my hair, and dress in the damp clothes, knowing the sun will dry them soon enough. Following the stream against its current seems the smartest course of action. I'm travelling uphill now, which I prefer, with a source of fresh water, not only for myself, but possible game. I easily take out a strange bird that must be some form of wild turkey. Anyway, it looks pretty edible to me. By late afternoon, I decide to build a small fire and cook the meat, betting that the dusk will help conceal the smoke, which I can quench in the fire by nightfall. I clean the game, taking extra care with the bird, but there's nothing alarming about it. Once the feathers are plucked, it's no bigger than a chicken, but it's plump and firm. I've just placed the first lot over the coals when I hear a twig snap. In one motion, I turn to the sound, bringing the bow and arrow over my shoulder. There's no one there, no one I can see anyway. Then I spot the tip of a child's boot just peeking out from behind the trunk of a tree. I relax my shoulders and a grin. She can move through the woods like a little shadow. You have to give her that. How else can she have followed me? The words came out of my mouth before I can stop them. You know, they're not the only ones who can form alliances, I say. For a moment, no response, and then one of Rue's eyes edges around the trunk. You want me for an ally? Why not? You saved me with those tracker jackers. You're smart enough to still be alive, and I can't seem to shake you anyway, I say. She blinks at me, trying to decide. You hungry? I can see her swallow hard, her eye flickering to the meat. Come on then. I had 2 kills today. Rue tentatively steps out into the open. Can I fix your strings? Or I can fix your strings. Can you? I asked. How? She digs in the pack she carries and pulls out a handful of leaves. I'm almost certain they're the ones my mother uses. Where'd you get those? Stings, not strings, sorry. Just around. We all carry them when we work in the orchards. They left a lot of nests there, said Rue. And there are a lot here too. That's right, you're from District 11. Agriculture, I say. Orchards, huh? That must be how you can fly around the trees like you've got wings. Rue smiles. I've landed on one of the few things she'll admit pride in. Well, come on then, fix me up. I plonk myself down by the fire and roll up my trouser leg to reveal the sting on my knee. To my surprise, Rue places the handful of leaves into her mouth and begins to chew them. My mother would use other methods, but it's not like we've got a lot of options. After a minute or so, Rue presses the gloppy green wad of chewed leaves and spit on my knee. Oh, the sound comes from my mouth before I can stop it. It's as if the leaves are actually leaching out the pain of the sting. Rue gives a giggle. Lucky you had sense to pull out the stingers, or it would have been a lot worse. Oh, do my neck. Do my cheek, I almost beg. Rue stuffs another handful of leaves in her mouth, and soon I'm laughing because the relief is so sweet. I notice a long burn on Rue's forearm. I've got something for that. I set aside my weapons and anoint her arm with the burn medicine. You have good sponsors, she says longingly. Have you got anything yet? I ask. She shakes her head. You will, though. Watch. The closer we get to the end, the more people will realize how clever you are. I turn the meat over. You weren't joking about wanting me for an ally? She asks. No, I meant it, I say. I can almost hear Hamish groaning as I team up with this wispy child. But I want her, because she's a survivor, and I trust her, and why not admit it? She reminds me of Prim. Okay, she says, and holds out her hand. We shake. It's a deal. Of course, this kind of deal can only be temporary, but neither of us mentions that. Rue contributes a big handful of some sort of starchy root to the meal, roasted over the fire. They have a sharp, sweet taste of parsnip. She recognizes the bird too, some wild thing they call a grusling in her district. She says sometimes a flock will wander into the orchard and they get a decent lunch that day. For a while, all conversation stops as we fill our stomachs. The gruslings, the grusling has delicious meat that's so fatty the grease drips down your face when you bite into it. Oh, says Rue with a sigh, I've never had a whole leg to myself before. I'll bet she hasn't. I'll bet meat hardly ever comes her way. I'll take the other, I say. Or take the other, I say. Really? She asks. Take whatever you want. Now that I've got a bow and arrows, I can get more. Plus, I've got snares. I can show you how to set them, I say. Rue looks uncertainly at the leg. Oh, take it, I say, putting the drumstick in her hands. It'll only keep a few days anyway, and we've got a whole bird, plus the rabbit. Once she's got hold of it, her appetite wins out, and she takes a huge mouthful. I'd have thought in District 11 you'd have a bit more to eat than us, since, you grow the food, I say. Rue's eyes widen. Oh no, we're not allowed to eat the crops. They arrest you or something? I ask. They whip you and make everyone else watch, says Rue. The mayor's very strict about it. I can tell by her explanation that it's not that uncommon an occurrence. A public whipping's a rare thing in District 12, though occasionally ones occur. Technically, Gail and I could be whipped on a daily basis for poaching in the woods. Well, technically we could get a whole lot worse, except all the officials buy our meat. Besides, our mayor, Madge's father, doesn't seem to have much taste for such events. Maybe being the least prestigious, poorest, and most ridiculed district in the country has its advantages, such as being largely ignored by the capital as long as we produce our coal quotas. Do you get all the coal you want? Rue asks. No, I answer. Just what we buy and whatever we track in on our boots. They feed us a bit extra during harvest so that people can keep going longer, says Rue. Don't you have to be in school? I ask. Not during harvest. Everyone works then, says Rue. It's interesting hearing about her life. We have so little communication with anyone outside our district. In fact, I wonder if the game makers are blocking out our conversation because even though the information seems harmless, they don't want people in different districts knowing about each other. At Rue's suggestion, we lay out our food plan ahead. She's seen most of mine, but I add the last couple of crackers and beef strips to the pile. She's gathered quite a collection of roots, nuts, greens, and even some berries. I roll an unfamiliar berry in my fingers. You sure this is safe? Oh, yes, we have them back home. I've been eating them for days, she says, popping a handful in her mouth. I tentatively bite into one. It's as good as our blackberries. Taking Rue on as an ally seems a better choice all the time. We divide up our food supplies, just in case we're separated. We both set out, and we'll both be set for a few days. Apart from the food, Rue has a small water skin, a homemade slingshot, and an extra pair of socks. She also has a sharp shard of rock that she uses as a knife. I know it's not much, she says as if embarrassed, but I had to get away from the cornucopia fast. You did just right, I said. When I spread out my gear, she gasps a little when she sees the sunglasses. How did you get those? She asks. In my pack. They've been useless so far. They don't block out the sun. They make it harder to see, I say with a shrug. Those aren't for sun, they're for darkness, exclaims Rue. Sometimes, when we harvest through the night, they pass us out a few extra pairs in the highest. Hold on, I've gotten too excited and gotten ahead of myself. Sometimes, when we harvest through the night, they'll pass out a few pairs to those of us highest in the trees, where the torchlight doesn't reach. One time, this boy Martin, he tried to keep his pair, hid them in his trousers. They killed him on the spot. They killed a boy for taking these, I say. Yes, and everyone knew he was no danger. Martin wasn't right in the head. I mean, he still acted like a 3-year-old. He just wanted the glasses to play with, says Rue. Hearing this makes me feel like District 12 is some sort of haven. Of course, people kneel or keel over from starvation all the time, but I can't imagine what the peacekeepers murdering a simple-minded child. There's a little girl. She's one of Greasy Say's grandkids who wanders around the hob. She's not quite right, but she's treated as a sort of a pet. People toss her scraps and things. So, what do these do? I ask Rue, taking the glasses. They let you see in complete darkness, says Rue. Try them tonight when the sun goes down. I give Rue some matches, and she makes sure I have plenty of leaves in case my stings flare up again. We extinguish our fire and head upstream. It's almost nightfall. Where do you sleep? I ask her. In the trees? She nods. In just your jacket? Rue holds up an extra pair of socks. I have these for my hands. I think of how cold these nights have been. You can share my sleeping bag if you want. We'll both easily fit in it. Her face lights up. I can tell this is more than she dared hope for. We pick a fork high up in the tree and settle in for the night, just as the anthem begins to play. There was no deaths today. Rue, I only woke up today. How many nights did I miss? The anthem should block out our words, but I can still whisper. I even take the precaution of covering my lips with my hands. I don't want the audience to know that what I'm planning to tell her about PETA. Taking a cue from me, she does the same. 2, she says. The girls from Districts 1 and 4 are dead. There's 10 of us left. Something strange happened at last. At least, I think it did. It might have been the tracker jacker venom that made me imagine things, I say. You know the boy from my district, Peter? I think he saved my life, but he was with the careers. He's not with them now, she says. I've spied on their base, camped by the lake. They made it back before they collapsed from all the stingers, but he's not there. Maybe he did try to save you. I don't answer. If, in fact, Peter did save me, I'm in his debt again, and this can't be paid back. If he did, it was probably just part of his act, you know, to make people think he was in love with me. Oh, says Rue thoughtfully, I didn't think it was an act. Of course it is, I say. He worked it out with our mentor. The anthem ends and the sky goes dark. Let's try out these glasses. I pull out the glasses and slip them on. Rue wasn't kidding. I can see everything, from the leaves on the trees to a skunk strolling through the bushes a good 15 metres away. I could kill it from here if I had a mind to. I could kill anyone. I wonder who else got a pair of these, I say. The careers have 2 pairs, but they've got everything down by the lake, Rue said, and they're so strong. We're strong too, I say, just in a different way. You are. You can shoot, she says. What can I do? You can feed yourself. Can they? I ask. They don't need to. They have all those supplies, Rue says. Say they didn't. Say the supplies were gone. How long would they last? I say. I mean, it's the Hunger Games, right? But, Katniss, they're not hungry, says Rue. No, they're not. That's the problem. I agree. And for the first time, I have a plan. A plan that isn't motivated by the need to fight an evasion. It's an offensive plan. And I think we're going to have to fix that, Rue. And that's the end of chapter 15. Thank you for listening.